Mrs. Hendricks? I turned towards the unexpected voice interrupting our family dinner to see a sharply dressed man at the doorway. I'm Kenneth Briggs, a private investigator. He stepped inside, ignoring Derek's questioning look. I have some sensitive information regarding your husband. My heart raced as Briggs withdrew a manila envelope. Mrs. Hendricks, I regret to inform you that your husband has been involved in an affair for the past 8 months. The room fell silent as Derek's fork clattered onto his plate. I felt the blood drain from my face as Briggs removed a sheaf of photographs, each one a nauseating gut punch. There was Derek, locked in intimate embraces with a slender brunette whose face I instantly recognized, my estranged younger sister, Elise. You lying, cheating bastard! I erupted, shattering the stillness. Bile rose in my throat as I hurled the photos across the table, uncaring that our teenage daughters flinched at the venom in my voice. Derek's complexion turned ashen. Marla, I can explain. Like hell you can. I cut him off with a sweep of my hand, chest heaving with anger and betrayal. How could you do this to me, to our family? I gestured at our girls, faces contorted with shock and confusion. Mrs. Hendricks, Briggs spoke evenly, I have documented evidence of your husband systematically draining finances and diverting assets to fund his indiscretions with your sister over the past several months. The despair sliced through me, sharp as a knife. I had suspected Derek's distance, the constant business trips and late nights, but Elise? My own flesh and blood? My temple throbbed as waves of rage threatened to drown me. I'm leaving for Shanghai tonight on an urgent business trip, Derek abruptly announced, rising from his chair. Defiance flashed across his taut features. When I return, we'll discuss this rationally like adults. Don't bother coming back, I shouted after his retreating figure. I whirled towards Elise's damning photos, still strewn across the tablescape amidst our half-eaten dinner. My life as I knew it lay in ruins, but I would not surrender so easily. Mustering every ounce of composure, I turned to face my bewildered daughters. This changes nothing for you two, I stated, my voice fortified with a conviction I didn't quite feel. Your father and I stumbled over the words, tasting ashes on my tongue. We're going through a difficult time, but I promise you we'll get through this. Their frightened expressions twisted the knife deeper into my heart. I watched numbly as they fled the maelstrom of shattered trust and heartbreak, now consuming the home I'd thought was unshakable. Briggs remained an uncomfortable witness. My services have been paid in full to provide you with all available documentation, he remarked, sliding the envelope towards me. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hendricks. No wife deserves this. An icy calm insulated me as I accepted the file. Don't be sorry, Mr. Briggs. My voice hardened with grim resolution. Be ready, because I'm just getting started. The hours blurred together after Derek's abrupt departure. I paced the hallways of our home, a gilded cage now tainted by his deception. Framed photos mocked me at every turn, snapshots of happier times twisted into bitter lies. I sank onto the bed we once shared, cradling my throbbing head. How could the man I loved, the father of my children, betray me so callously? And with Elise, of all people, my own sister? Trembling fingers traced the sharp lines of Derek's deceit, immortalized in Briggs' damning photos. An animalistic rage seethed within me, screaming for vengeance. I envisioned hurling plates, diamonds, bricks, anything to shatter the man who had shattered my world, without a shred of remorse. But I couldn't lash out recklessly, not with custody of the girls at stake. I had to remain level-headed, strategic. Derek's smug assertion that we'd discuss this rationally still rankled, as if he could whitewash his transgressions with empty platitudes. No, I needed a plan, a way to strike back and regain control, to ensure he and Elise faced the consequences they deserved. The echo of the front door slamming ricocheted through the stillness, jarring me from my stupor. I tensed, but familiar footsteps ascended the staircase. Hey! Theo's concerned face appeared in the doorway. Of course, he had rushed over after hearing the news. My dear friend and the best divorce attorney in the state. Wordlessly, I handed him the file, watching his expression contort with disbelief and anger as he examined the indisputable proof. That lying sack of shit, he growled at last, raking calloused fingers through his graying hair. Don't mince words, Theo, I replied with a hollow laugh. Just tell me honestly, what are my options? His jaw tightened grimly. We build an ironclad case. Hit him where it hurts, his money, his assets, his reputation. With evidence like this, he waved the folder in emphasis, we bury the bastard. A vindictive thrill coursed through me at the thought of skinning Derek for every last penny, to leave him destitute and disgraced as penance for his crimes. Good, I stated, steeling my voice, because I want it all. Every sordid detail, every illicit transfer of marital assets exposed, he doesn't get to slink away unscathed. Theo's expression shifted to one of cautious concern. Marla, think this through. Once we expose him, there's no going back. Your marriage, your lives together. It'll all be destroyed, played out in open court for everyone to dissect. Can you live with that? I felt my expression harden into a rictus carved from ice. Theo, he destroyed my life the moment he betrayed me with my own sister, I replied with frigid clarity. Now I'm going to destroy his. Those final words unleashed a twisted sense of dark satisfaction. For too long, I had been the victim, the deceived wife, the embarrassed sister, the fool, but no longer. If Derek and Elise wanted the gloves off, I would oblige them. Starting today, I was going on the attack. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of grim determination. On Theo's advice, I began methodically collecting evidence to solidify my case against Derek and Elise. When the private investigator's report confirmed my worst fears that Derek had been systemically siphoning money and assets to fund his tawdry affair, a cold fury insulated me. I felt icy detachment transcend the devastating anguish of his betrayal. First, I discreetly transferred the contents of our joint accounts to a new one under my name alone, ensuring Derek would be unable to drain our finances further. The numbers swam before my eyes, each pilfered figure another twist of the knife in my gut. Next came compiling the paperwork. Copies of bank statements, unexplained expenditures, mortgage transfers, all blatantly suspicious. Theo assured me we had more than enough to decimate Derek's falsely cultivated facade of martial bliss and business success. We also need to figure out your living situation, he advised during one late-night strategy session, the shadows accentuating his frown lines. If you stay in the house, it just gives Derek's lawyers more ammunition to claim you condoned his actions. I worried my bottom lip, reluctant to uproot our daughters' lives any more than necessary. But Theo made a fair point. Any delay could jeopardize my custody claim. Surprising even myself, I found the answer immediately. My friend Lena? She has that big place in Hudson after her divorce. Theo's eyebrows arched in approval. The financial advisor who hates cheaters? Perfect. She'll make an amazing ally and witness. Sure enough, one phone call was all it took for Lena to open her doors without question. What day do you need me, hon? Her smoky voice crackled over the line, full of the vinegar and vulnerability that characterized survivors like us. Within 36 hours, I had packed up what little I could carry of our old life and ushered the girls into Lena's guest rooms. To their shell-shocked whispers about this only being temporary, I forced a reassuring smile that was only partially a lie. Chin up, ladies, Lena commanded, wrapping us in her signature embrace, rich curls cascading around her warm features. We've got your backs. Count on that. As we hunkered in the cocoon of Lena's hospitality, I felt the first flickers of hope reigniting inside me, that Derek and Elise's transgressions wouldn't go unavenged, and that a path forward still remained. Then the phone rang, shattering the moment's fragile complacency. Derek's number flashed across the screen, and an icy chill gripped me. The first volley was about to be fired. I stared at Derek's number flashing insistently on the screen. A twisted part of me longed to answer, to confront him with the full depth of his betrayal. But I knew better than to show my hand prematurely. Lena, I called out, can you join me? Within moments, her concerned features appeared in the hallway. Is everything okay? Wordlessly, I tilted the phone towards her. Understanding flickered across her expression as Derek's number buzzed again. Want me to take this? I nodded gratefully. Lena was ex-military, unflappable and strategic, the perfect shield against Derek's manipulation. She accepted the call, angling the mouthpiece away. Derek, her tone was clipped but composed. Marla's indisposed at the moment. There was a muffled torrent from the other end. I saw Lena's jaw tighten imperceptibly. I'm sure she'll reach out when she's ready to discuss things rationally. Appointed Barb. For now, it's best you give her some space to process recent developments. Another eruption of protests. this one raising Lena's sculptured brows. I didn't realize rehashing sensitive family matters was appropriate workplace conversation, she rejoined coolly. But I'll pass along your thoughts to Marla. Goodbye, Derek. She disconnected the call with a succinct tab. Sorry about that, Han. I know that couldn't have been easy listening to his nonsense. A tremulous exhale escaped me. You're amazing, Lena, truly. She waved a dismissive hand. Please, that blowhard doesn't rattle me. Her warm eyes creased with concern. But you look like you're carrying the weight of the world right now. What else can I do? I felt a renewed surge of purpose. Actually, there is one thing. An hour later, we were closeted in Lena's luxurious home office, poring over the meticulously assembled dossier that would become the armament for my legal battle. Lena shook her head slowly as she absorbed the bank statements, check stubs, and appalling money trail. This is embezzlement, plain and simple. He bled you dry to keep that little harlot satisfied. My voice was toneless. The sad part? He thought I'd never find out, that I was too busy or too oblivious to ever piece it all together. Her sculpted features contorted with disgust. What a delusional, selfish prick. Well, the delusion ends now. I clicked over to the shared portfolio, watching the figures populate. These are all the holdings and assets Derek can legally access. Understanding flickered in Lena's obsidian eyes. And you want to lock him out? I nodded curtly. Every last dime gets retitled under my sole name, investments, real estate, liquid securities. He doesn't get to touch a penny of what's rightfully mine until the courts decide otherwise. Lena's dexterous fingers danced across the keyboard, initiating transfers and updated credentials. Consider it done. That money-grubbing liar is officially cut off. Her expression shifted as she decrypted another subfolder. Marla, what are these numbered accounts in the Caymans? I felt my cheeks flush as fragments of hushed conversation suddenly clicked into place. You're telling me that arrogant bastard was hoarding money offshore this entire time? She let out a slow whistle. And not just chump change, either. Her deft strokes isolated each account, each one more grossly embellished than the last. He could have been diligently saving for our future, our retirement. The bitterness was acid on my tongue. Instead, he pulled an economic 9/11 on us to secure his little hideaway nest with a lease. Lena's elfish features contorted with revulsion. Well, this is step too far. He can't just go burying assets and flaunting the law like that. I realize that now. My hands curled into fists as the magnitude of his duplicity hit me in waves. That duplicitous son of a bitch. Lena reached over and squeezed my arm, her touch steadying. Hey, we'll nail him for this, I swear. He's not getting away with pillaging your hard-earned nest egg. Jaw tightened with resolution. I held her gaze levelly. You're damn right, he won't. Not on my watch. The next few weeks became an intricate choreography of shielding myself from Derek's manipulations and shoring up my defenses. Thanks to Lena's Herculean efforts, all our major assets had been retroactively retitled under my singular ownership, staunching the financial hemorrhaging. Not that Derek didn't try to regain control. His calls and texts blew up my phone in increasingly erratic increments, peppering his demands with hollow protestations of innocence and misguided love. Marla, I know you're upset, but can't we talk this through like rational adults? I'm still your husband, and I demand. Towards the end, even the girls noticed, flinching at the shrill tones distorting from the speakers. I forestalled their concerned questions with reassuring smiles and stated that their father just needed some time. In reality, I had both dreaded and anticipated this escalation in Derek's behavior. So I followed Theo's counsel in documenting every irate voicemail, every unhinged text diatribe. More damning proof for the legal battleground that loomed ahead. To mute my inner turmoil, I receded inwards, letting a fortifying detachment insulate me. I no longer dwelled on the gutting anguish of his betrayal, nor the gaping void his calloused disregard had eviscerated. Instead, I simply existed. Day to day, checking the obligatory boxes with the armor of detachment, deflecting the numbing currents of fury, regret, and occasional pity that taunted me. Theo assured me this emotional icebox was normal, even advisable. Feeling is the enemy right now, Marla. It'll just cloud your judgment and give Derek's shysters an opening. Nevertheless, the customary rituals of my old life still haunted me like ghostly sentinels, mocking the hollowness of my existence. I found myself jolting awake in panic at 3 a.m., bitter at the loss of the partner who had once slumbered beside me, reassuring and sheltering. Who had that man been? The one I committed 20-something years to? Or had he died long ago, subsumed by the sociopsychic monster who now reviled me? Desperate for an outlet, I immersed myself in maintaining the vestiges of normalcy for the girls, ensuring their schedules and activities persisted with minimal disruption. Blessing Lena's hospitality for providing a cocoon of security, however fleeting it might prove. Still, their troubled frowns whenever Derek's name arose spoke volumes. How much longer could I reasonably postpone revealing the truth? That the father figure they had idolized was well on his way to becoming a pariah? That our family nucleus was splintering beyond repair? They were sharp, precocious young ladies. They would eventually discern that the ensuing divorce was no amicable separation. I found myself craving other distractions, any diversion to divert my mind from its ceaseless spools of recrimination and dismay. With Lena's encouragement, I gingerly resumed my passion projects like painting and weaving, channeling my pent-up tempests into intricate line work and fractal textures. I joined her twice-weekly boxing sessions at an exclusive boutique gym, relishing the euphoric simplicity of repeatedly pummeling the heavy bag in controlled bursts of exertion. My therapist, Dr. Ramirez, applauded these efforts towards self-reclamation during our bi-weekly visits. A serene, maternal presence, she nonetheless stressed the necessity of working through the grieving process. "You're building impressive fortifications, Marla, but you can't wall off the pain indefinitely. It will find cracks, erode your defenses. Let yourself experience the waves of hurt, then release them with intentional healing. It's the only way to fully excise the toxins he inflicted." Even the good doctor's empathetic counsel sparked flickering prickles of resentment. Hadn't I endured enough psychological carnage already? Why should I purposefully immiserate myself by treading through the minefield of what was and what could have been? 10 agonizing days after his abrupt departure, Derek finally returned from his supposed business trip. I braced myself, squaring my shoulders as Theo and I waited in Lena's vestibule. The familiar crunch of tires on gravel heralded his arrival. I gripped the thick dossier tighter, its damning contents fortifying my resolve. The front door burst open and Derek blustered inside, withering slightly at the sight of Theo. "Why am I not surprised you're here?" he sneered. "This is the part where you start listening for once in your miserable life," Theo stated flatly. Derek opened his mouth, no doubt to spew more indignant dismissals, but I cut him off. No more lies. My voice was glacial. No more deceptions, delusions, or pitiful attempts to gaslight me. With surgical precision, I unfurled the gallery of photos, spreadsheets, and documentation across the sofa. Derek's complexion ashen as the incriminating evidence of his malfeasance proliferated. "Not only have you been serially unfaithful," I heard my tone acquire a razor's edge, "but you've been slowly looting our accounts, pillaging our assets to fund your sad little tryst with my sister." His Adam's apple bobbed rapidly as panic crept into his expression. "Marla, I can explain ever. Save your rationalizations. They're meaningless at this point." I shoved aside his grasping hands, the paper seeming to sear his fingertips. "Your signature is on every bank draft, every wire transfer, every unauthorized disbursement of funds, plain as day." Derek's facade finally cracked, ugliness twisting his features. "So that's it, then? A few indiscretions, and you're burning everything to the ground? Our marriage, my career, our family legacy?" "Your indiscretions have already detonated our family," I exploded, infusing every ounce of scorn and disgust into the words. "I don't recognize the pathetic bastard standing before me anymore." "You self-righteous bitch," he erupted with a sudden primal fury that made Theo tense instinctively. "You think you can publicly flog me like some criminal without consequences?" My answering smile was as frigid as Antarctic ice. "I relish those consequences, Derek, because in the end, you'll be broke, alone, and utterly disgraced. A shunned, soiled nothing, while I walk away from the ashes." Chin jutting in a final petulant display of contempt, he turned on his heel and stormed out. But even his exaggerated bluster couldn't disguise the dawning horror on his face. He knew he was cornered, outmaneuvered. Checkmate. That night, even my dreams offered no sanctuary. I found myself crying hot, angry tears, not from sorrow, but from a place of visceral rage that this utter waste of a man had dared to betray me so profoundly, to squander every ounce of goodwill, trust, and commitment I'd so foolishly vested in him. But the tears were also cathartic, lancing years of pent-up disillusionment and deception. As the howling echoes of Derek's classically juvenile tantrums faded, a steely resolve cemented within me. No more would I be the victim, the pretty little ornament masking the rot festering beneath. From this point forward, I would be the vengeful architect of his self-destruction, and every psychological dagger, every precisely calibrated legal maneuver would serve as the instruments of that exquisite retribution. I would burn it all down and salt the earth, just like he deserved. In the days following Derek's meltdown, I wasted no time capitalizing on the initiative. Utilizing my collated evidence, I filed for an at-fault divorce on grounds of adultery, abandonment, and the unauthorized dissipation of marital assets. While part of me recoiled at the prospect of airing our imploded marriage's dirty laundry in open court, another part recognized the strategic value. By striking first with an overwhelming offense, I seized control of the narrative while blindsiding Derek. "He'll be scrambling to build a defense on multiple fronts," Theo assured me, typically unflappable demeanor, betraying a hint of dark satisfaction. "Let's see him lawyer up to counter all these interlocking claims." True to form, Derek soon found himself engulfed under an avalanche of damaging disclosures. The paternity allegations alone were enough to decimate what remained of his professional reputation. Coupled with the fraud and asset disclosures, they cemented his status as a radioactive pariah. By leveraging my carefully assembled documentation and testimony, my legal team constructed an inescapable cage of consequences. Surveillance evidence placed him at hotels and rendezvous spots, often withdrawing substantial cash amounts just beforehand. Banking records revealed his establishment of slush fund accounts and wire transfers to international holding locations. Even more damaging were the third-party testimonies of Elise's indiscriminate confessions to family members, of Derek's increasingly callous behavior towards me and the girls, and the contradictory paper trails he left behind while cavorting with his mistress. Within weeks, the court of public opinion had sentenced Derek as guilty. Long before our divorce could be formalized or the civil trials concluded, the man was an utter professional and personal pariah. "You did this," he raged during one ill-advised confrontation. "My colleagues won't even speak to me anymore." I merely shrugged. "I'm simply disclosing facts and letting people draw their own conclusions, Derek. If they're judging you harshly, perhaps that's indicative of your actions." The expression contorting his face oscillated between apoplectic rage and sheer panic. It was abundantly clear he had never contemplated the full-scale, mutually assured destruction I was orchestrating. That his ego had blinded him to the very real prospect of a life in ashes. Watching his mounting desperation furnished a deeply vindicating gratification. My emotional resurrection seemed to flourish in inverse proportion to his self-inflicted ruination. I found myself giving media interviews with selective, surgically precise responses. Posed photos were our art directed to present me as the quintessential wounded but resilient heroine, steadfastly soldiering forward for her innocent children. Conversely, every interaction and court appearance saw Derek further unraveling into an erratic, sullen caricature of the urbane success he once feigned. It became undeniable that his simmering, thwarted indignation constituted the final death rattle of ego before total annihilation. For any residual pity I might have felt for the man rapidly dissipated. In its place blossomed an almost rapturous sense of karmic inevitability. This was always his destiny, to be outwitted and outmaneuvered by the woman he so casually discarded in pursuit of instant gratification. Not that I would brandish the bloody coup as some Amazon's war prize, but by maintaining an outward veneer of gracious composure, I let the debris of Derek's immolation serve as its own cautionary testament. Fool me once, shame on you, but to self-destruct so thoroughly despite every opportunity for redemption? Well, that unmitigated failure of character was his alone, inscribed across the ashes of his legacy. Despite the protracted legal battles, the divorce itself was a mere formality at this point. Derek's derelictions were so overwhelming, so undeniably malicious, that the proceedings proved utterly one-sided. The court awards sole custody to Mrs. Hendricks in addition to a substantial majority of liquid assets and properties, the judge stated in clipped, dispassionate tones. Mr. Hendricks' conduct represents a complete abrogation of his familial duties and marital vows. Across the aisle, Derek slumped in his seat, a pathetic, broken husk animating what remained of his publicly immolated reputation. Gone were the immaculate suits and assured airs. He sat there, hollowed and ashen in discarded clothes, reeking of whiskey and sleepless nights. His eyes remained downcast, unable to meet my unflinching gaze. As the gavel declared the marriage officially dissolved, I felt an unfamiliar pang reverberate through me. Not sorrow or regret, those indulgences were distant memories. No, this was the exhilarating release of a burden, shackles tough to the soul being struck off with a stark finality. Theo clasped my shoulder, his calloused grip anchoring me back to the moment. "It's done," he murmured with a barely perceptible nod. "He got everything he deserved." My smile was equally understated yet serene. No, he got far less than that. In the hellish months that followed, Derek's descent charted a tragicomic freefall. Once an upwardly mobile banking executive, his professional pedigree mutated into permanent radioactive toxicity. Every job opportunity disintegrated as cagey references shared the cautionary chronicle of his philandering, misogyny, and white-collar embezzlement. Even his closest business associates distanced themselves, justifiably wary of being tainted by association with such a comprehensive implosion. From that inferno emerged my total legal and moral vindication. But more importantly, it heralded an emancipation from the shattered dreams and profound delusions that had anchored me to that wretched man for so long. The assets I had wrenched from Derek's grasp furnished me a revitalizing new lease on life. Within 6 months, I had liquidated our marital residence and invested in a sleek, elevated townhome in a more vibrant, re-energized area of the city, closer to the girls' schools and extracurriculars. No longer shrouded in spatial mementos of trauma and despair, I found myself blossoming back into my truest self. Career opportunities that had stagnated during my marriage rekindled with fresh fire. Artist collectives and nonprofits welcomed my talents with open arms. Even the girls seemed to thrive in this regenerative environment. The pinched, haunted wariness that had clouded their expressions steadily lifted. Recitals, matches, and events no longer triggered bristled silences, where Derek's absence loomed like an unexploded mortar. We were free. Wandering the farmers' markets and cultural festivals that epitomized our new neighborhood's beating heart, I could almost physically feel their tension eroding beneath the purifying sunshine of autonomy. Almost cruelly, I ensured Elise received no such comforts. My lawsuits alleging her complicity in the depletion of marital assets continued unabated. Just as the courts had scoured Derek of every ill-gotten gain, so too would she face devastating financial repercussions. Petty recompense, some might argue. But such was the emotional ruinscape she had indulged in seeding that I felt no mercy. In fact, I made it a point to routinely update her on her dwindling legal circumstances, now that pride and perjury charges were being considered. Let her endure even a fraction of the torment she helped inflict, watching her greed and wanton selfishness facilitate her own undoing. Some called it overkill. I called it karma, finally delivered. The only pity I retained was for my former self, the myopic, naively devoted woman who had anchored her identity to a depraved lie and a despicable con man. The hard-learned lessons had flayed that identity until only truth remained. Perhaps that was the true path to healing, embracing these harsh revelations as brusque awakenings rather than debilitating traumas, to finally see the withered, desiccated remnants exposed, while turning my gaze to the vibrant sunlight and new horizons untainted by past poisons. Staring clear-eyed into the expanse of second chances, I found myself eager to begin anew.